Shabbat Shalom. So there is a poignant midrash tying together 2 out of our 5 books of Torah, that of Genesis, which we just finished, and that of Exodus, which we have just begun. It teaches that on the night of the Exodus, as the Israelites were ready to leave, Moses had realized he'd forgotten to take something very important with him: the bones of Joseph. For you see, upon his deathbed, Joseph had made his brothers promise that he would not spend eternity buried in Egypt. This was a promise that Moses, according to our Torah, knows well and intended to keep. However, he had no idea where Joseph's bones were to be found. Moses searches high and low to no avail, and right as he is about to give up, he meets Serach, the daughter of Asher, and therefore a niece of Joseph's, part of Joseph's children's generation, which is to say that by this point she is an old woman. "Moses, I know where Joseph is buried," Serach says. "The Egyptians put weights on his body, placed him in a coffin, and sunk him in the Nile." Moses then walks to the edge of the river, as suddenly he remembered how he too floated down that same river as a baby in a basket. Gazing at the water, Moses says, "Joseph, Joseph, the time has come to redeem our oath to you. It's time to go home." This midrash is the epitome of the Jewish concept of home, with both Joseph and Moses having lived most of their lives in Egypt and posthumously being returned to the land of Israel. It illustrates the complicated idea of home as a core facet of our identities as a people who have often been split across time, space, or both. As part of our own Holy Blossom identity, we often talk of home, meaning here in Canada, the land where we live and therefore have the responsibility to tend for, and of homeland, referring to the land of Israel, the center of the Jewish world, that, as we sing when we recite Hatikvah, our Jewish souls long for and our eyes are always looking towards. Being truly fortunate having just returned from a much-needed 2 weeks visiting my family in Australia, I also this evening wanted to throw an additional category into the mix, that of hometown. So with these 3 different notions in mind, let's paint this picture threefold. 1, there is no feeling like it. Flying into Ben Gurion Airport and watching the landscape change from sea to grass to desert and back again. The wheels touch on the ground, and occasionally the passengers clap, relieved and delighted to have arrived in the Holy Land. Then the drive from the airport and through the winding hills until all of a sudden a vast vista of sandstone opens up before you, a golden dome and the surrounding old city of walls of Jerusalem unmistakably rising over its peaks and falls. It might be overwhelmingly familiar and appear as if you've been here before. Perhaps that's because, according to our tradition, yes, you have. Whether that is actually the case or not, for this is what it means to be in our homeland. We may experience this sense of déjà vu because within our Torah, it is the land sworn to our ancestors in this Shabbat's parasha, Va'era, as well as consistently in many other places in our sacred texts. In Parashat Va'era, God famously instructs Moses to bring our people out of Egypt, Moses and Aaron, I should say, to implore Pharaoh to let our people go as we declare at Pesach, and God subsequently promises, "V'heveiti etchem el haaretz asher nasati et yadi latet ota," that I, God, will bring you, the Israelites, to the land that was promised to be given to you, and then paraphrasing, to your ancestors as an inheritance. In other words, as Jews, there is this innate connection, an innate relationship, an innate tie to Israel as the land of our ancestors. When we are there, when we are thinking of Israel, it is a strange sense of a return to a place we might not know, but well, we know. Historically, traditionally, emotionally, religiously, and more. This is why we pray for Israel's welfare each and every Shabbat in the presence of the Torah as we sing Avinu Sheba Shamayim Tzur Yisrael V'Go'alo Barech et Medinat Yisrael Reshit Tzmichat Ge'olatenu. God in heaven, rock and redeemer of Israel, bless the state of Israel, the first flowering of our redemption. Put differently, just as it was for our ancestors, Israel is so deeply important to us because it is a symbol of the realization of our hopes and aspirations, and our sincerest wish is that they may be achieved peacefully, joyfully, and securely. In Holy Blossom language, we might name this as Ahavat Yisrael, the love of Israel, one of the 6 pillars of our congregational identity to which we often refer. As with Avinu Sheba Shamayim, it is the recognition of the shared destiny and dreams between diaspora and Israeli Jews, our mutual joys and sorrows, concerns and celebrations, and a respect for diversity in the expression of what this might look like, including concerns for Israel's security and welfare at times of trouble such as now. This partnership is perhaps the reason why Israel is forefront on our minds as this Sunday marks 100 days of captivity for the hostages remaining in Gaza, and as Israel currently faces charges of genocide in The Hague, charges Canada's Justice Rosalie Abella describes as a legal absurdity. We'd be remiss not to mention these occurrences right now. We can subsequently turn our thoughts to Canada and paint the next picture, one that we are likely familiar with too. So, picture 2. There is nothing quite like it. Flying into Pearson over Niagara Falls, if we're lucky enough, the heart is uplifted at the sight of the lake, the looming and iconic CN Tower located in the concrete jungle below the Rogers Centre in its shadows. It's the favourite coffee shop, the local grocery store, the office routine, the friend's birthday party, the walking trail, the snow, all the innocuous details that we don't think too hard or too much about, where life simply is because you've worked for it, because you've built it. You breathe as the lungs fill with calm as you exhale, you're home. With this image in mind, we understand that it is equally inherently Jewish to care deeply about the welfare of the countries in which we reside, too. We adhere to the notion of Dina de Malchuta Dina, the Talmudic principle that we have the responsibility to abide by the civilian law of the land. We also know from both Philo and Josephus, these ancient philosophers, that prayers for the Roman emperor were routinely offered in the 1st century CE, and that by the 17th century, this was the universal custom throughout all lands in which Jews lived. We can look out for those nuggets of information in our Siddur Pirchei Kodesh tomorrow morning. In our modern manifestation, again, each Shabbat, we pray for our good country of Canada too. To paraphrase our Siddur Pirchei Kodesh, for those in positions of leadership and power, that they and we as well may serve our nation effectively, keep it safe from affliction, strife, and war, and hold it up as an example of compassion and justice in our world. Finally, another picture, one you are less likely to know or perhaps don't know it at all. There is nothing quite like it. Flying into Sydney Harbour on a bright sunny day, early in the morning, beautiful even after an absurdly long time on a plane which you can't wait to get out of by this point. So there they are, the famous Harbour Bridge, the Opera House, Luna Park, these icons of the Sydney skyline appearing one by one, and you're convinced that Qantas does this just to show off. Then, once you're finally off that cursed plane, the icons become far less dramatic. the suburb your brother now lives in, your mother's preschool, your old high school, your grandmother's house, the park that you and your dog always went on adventures. It's amazing how, even after many years, there are certain things that remain almost instinctual here, such as driving on the other side of the road, or being able to count the number of train stations between points A and B. With many of you in our congregation originally hailing from Montreal, this might resonate, for even if you've been in Toronto for 40 years, you might still remember your favourite diner, still have parents or cousins or so forth who live there and whom you enjoy visiting, and you might take pleasure in strolling through your childhood neighbourhood when you do. Personally, that's the very essence of what it means to be in one's hometown. It's the place where you will always have roots, or what the rabbis might be a mikdash me'at, a small sanctuary, a place of security and familiarity, where we first fostered Jewish and other memories, and which might always bring a sense of nostalgic comfort. Yet it is equally the litmus test for how deeply you have planted new roots, how far you've grown and stretched as a person. You can always appreciate and be grateful for it, even though it's still home, but not quite home anymore. So as we conclude this Shabbat, this nexus of home, homeland, and hometown, exemplify what our Tosefta means when it teaches us that we can have a heart of many rooms. This nuance is beautifully captured by Rabbi Angela Buchdal, Senior Rabbi of Central Synagogue in New York, in an interview with the Shalom Hartman Institute conducted by Senior Fellow Tal Becker, coincidentally the Australian-Israeli now defending Israel in the International Court of Justice. You might have seen some of those pictures. Buchdal talks about being familiar herself with this idea, having been born in South Korea, moving to America as a very young girl, and being confused between these two identities when children in each country would ask her, "Where are you from?" When she visited Israel, she then encountered what she terms a love that was not always reciprocated due to her mixed identity as a Korean, as a Jew, and later a leading Reform rabbi, but that she undoubtedly and undeniably felt that she had a claim to the land and that the land had a claim upon her too. In rehashing her mixed emotions to her mother, she describes how her mother then told her that she could build a home anywhere, and that home is ultimately the place where you have family, love, acceptance, friends, and where you can be fully realized. With the multitudes of meanings of home to us as Jews, how fortunate are we to have the blessing of simply living out this complexity in our own many-roomed hearts, a challenge and a charge that has lasted and will continue to last throughout the ages, wherever ourselves and our people may be found. For this Shabbat, it is just enough to say, it was good to be home and it's good to be home. Shabbat Shalom.